All right. We are on Sadi Dalid. Okay, we are about 3-4 lines down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, 5 lines down from the top. Remember, we're still discussing issues pertaining to carrying out objects from one domain to another. Okay. That we had dealt with the question of measurement. Now we brought in the issue of intent. And we're going to see if the Gemara now is going to bring in any other aspects to this concern. Okay? So we're starting back with, again, citing a section from our Mishnah on Sadi Daled, 5 lines down. Etachai b'mita patur, implying that if one carried out a living person on a bed or a stretcher or something like that, they would be exempt. Af al hamita, even for carrying out the bed or the stretcher. Okay, everybody with me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go from there. All right. I just want to check everybody is okay. If some of you need to mute yourselves a little bit. Okay. All right. That would be helpful. Okay. So the Gemara picks up, Lema matnitin Rabbi Natani. Shall we say that our Mishnah is according to Rabbi Natan, velo Rabbanan, and not according to the rabbis? The Tanya, as taught in the Braita, Hamotzi behema chayav va'of, reshut harabim, one who carries out a domestic animal or a non-domesticated animal or a bird into the public domain, bein chayin uvein shchutin, chayav. Okay, whether the animal is dead or alive or dead or slaughtered in this case, he is obligated. In other words, he is culpable. Rabbi Natan Omer, al shchutin chayav. Says Rabbi Natan, in those cases, if the animal has been slaughtered, then the person carrying it into another domain is culpable. Ba'al chayin patur. But on the living animal, he's exempt. Why? Shachai noseet atzmo. Because a living animal, okay, is capable of carrying itself. Okay. Now this phrase is going to be the clinch pin, so to speak, in terms of defining as we continue on the rest of the Amud. Amar Rava, says Rava, afilu tema Rabbanan. You could even say that this part, our Mishnah, is according to the rabbis. Why is that the case, right? Because we're going to say, okay, al kolcha lo plige Rabbanan alei de Rabbi Natan, that in general we say the rabbis don't disagree with Rabbi Natan, ela b'behema chayav va'of, in regards to specifically domestic, non-domestic, or a bird. Why? The misharvate nafshaihu. Why? Because these animals will try to stiffen themselves, as in other words, make themselves dead weight so that they can try to free themselves. Okay? Right? Aval adam chai denoseit atzmo. But a live human being who is able to carry, in other words, a live person on the bed, wakes up, okay, able to get off the bed and carry himself. Afilu Rabbanan modu. Then even the rabbis would acknowledge that in that case, the carrying out that person, the carriers would be exempt. Amarle Rav Adabar Ahava le Rabba. However, Rav Adabar Ahava says to Rabba with the following challenge, he says, Vaha Ditznan, what about that which we learned, Ben Betera, that Ben Betera says Matir Basus, okay, that he would permit it in regarding to a horse, okay? Right? Normally, remember, we've learned that they weren't supposed to sell animals to a Gentile, but a horse was permitted because for the most part, people would not work horses as work animals, but simply for riding purposes. And therefore the animal would not be worked on Shabbat. Okay? Vatanya ben Betera, and Ben Betera teaches, Matir basus mipnei shehu osebo malacha she'en chayavin alav chatat. Right? Why? Because Ben Betera holds the fact that in regard to the horse, sale to a non-Jew was permitted because it wasn't employed for work that ordinarily one would be required to bring a chatas, a sin offering, right? Because riding the horse on Shabbat was only an Isur D'Rabbanan and not an Isur D'Oraita. Okay? Va'amar Rabbi Yochanan, and says Rabbi Yochanan, Ben Betera, Rabbi Natan, Amru Davar Echad. That basically Ben Betera and Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Natan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, were saying the same thing. V'i amart, de lo plige Rabbanan ale, the Rabbi Natan. And if you were going to say that where the rabbis disagreed with Rabbi Natan was only ela bebehema chayav ha'of, in regards to cases of the domestic, non-domestic, or a bird, right? Mishum de mishavarte nefshayu, because they would stiffen their bodies as a way of becoming dead weight, we said, for freeing themselves. My area, Ben Betera v'Rabbi Natan. Then what difference are you saying is there between the view of Ben Betera and Rabbi Natan? Right? V'ha'amat afilu Rabbanan modu. And then you say that even the rabbis, okay, would agree. So the Gemara continues. Ki amar Rabbi Yochanan basus hamiyuchad la'ofot. He says, when Rabbi Yochanan said that it was permitted to sell a horse to Gentiles, okay, what was he referring to? That he was referring to a horse that was particularly used for carrying birds. Okay, now what do we mean by that? Says the Gemara, Umi ikasus amiyuchad la'ofot. Is there such a thing as a horse that is unique for set apart for carrying birds? So that's the end, says the Gemara. Yes. Ika the bay va'aidan. Yes, he says the Gemara. There are certain birds that are used by falcon hunters. And the falcon hunters, after they capture the bird, okay, they may tie the birds onto the backside of the horses. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Umode Rabbi Natan bekapot. Okay, and Rabbi Yochanan is telling us that when Rabbi Natan agrees, it's with the fact where these birds are bound up. Amar le Rav Ada bar Matna, Abaye, Vahahani Parsai, says Rav Ada bar Matna. Okay, what about these Persian officers, Persian Persian cavalry officers, okay, that wear heavy armor, okay? Right, what about them? He says, the kafite damu. Don't we say in some way that it's like they are bound up, okay, in that armor, and therefore, if we're saying something is bound, okay, and for the horses, is that an exception also? V'amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Betera, Rabbi Natan amru davar echad, and then you say that the two of them said the same thing. Okay, Hatam, says the Gemara, there, Ramot ruchahu tenakitlo. So he says there, the difference is that these Persian cavalry officers are arrogant. Okay, they're usually from nobility, and therefore they don't like to get down off their horses, right? Virahit, tlata parse, bekare, right? With the exception, and how do we know that they can get off their horse and can actually walk, right? Dahahu par dashacha, right? Because there was an incident once about a particular Persian cavalry officer, Diratach Malka Eloyai, where the king was angry against him, and as a result, Varahit Tlata Parsai Bekarai, and the king made him run three parsangs on foot. Okay? So that's how we know that they're not the same as these special horses to carry these birds. Okay. Now our Mishnah continues with a new statement from our Gemara continues with a new statement, new part of the Mishnah. Et hameit b'mita chayav v'chein kezayet min hameit v'chomer. Okay, so we're talking about carrying out now a corpse on a stretcher or a bed, or likewise, even part of the corpse, an olive amount of the corpse, right? Okay. Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, says Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Va'amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Shimon Reish Lakish, Shimon ben Lakish. Right? The following. Poter Haya Rabbi Shimon. That Rabbi Shimon declared exempt, right? Oh, let's go over. Af b'motzi et hamet l'kovro. Even in a situation, if they were carrying out the corpse for the purpose of burial. Okay? Because there, why should the person carrying out be exempt? Right? It is not for the, in a sense, benefit of the corpse per se. It might be benefit for the other people living in the house. Okay? Right? So therefore, it's not done for that specific purpose. Amar Rava, says Rava, Umode Rabbi Shimon b'mar lachporbo. And Rabbi Shimon, okay, would, what about another example, says Rava, okay, that Rabbi Shimon would also acknowledge, okay, a non-guilt, non-culpable, in a situation where a person had a hoe or a shovel, right? And they carried it out, right? Lachporbo, to dig with it, b'sefer Torah likrotbo, or carried out a scroll of Torah scroll in order to read from it, the chayav, that he would therefore in those situations would be culpable. Pshita, isn't that obvious, says the Gemara? Because he's doing that for that specific purpose. He's using the item. The iha nami malacha she'enat tzricha legufahi. Because maybe in this case, okay, maybe these acts, we might argue that the carrying out is not for the intended purpose of its use. It's not a labor that's necessary per se. Okay? So what happens? Ela mulacha shetzricha legufa la Rabbi Shimon hechi mishkachet la. So if that's the case, a kind of avoda, a kind of work where it is for that intended purpose, right, for its own sake, okay? Okay, where do we find it in regards to Rabbi Shimon, right? Where is it possible? Mahu detema. What are you saying then? Ad deika legufo ulegufa. For Rabbi Shimon, then, it has to be both for its own purpose and for the purpose of using the item. Okay? In other words, for its own sake and for others' sake as well. Okay? So what would be an example, okay, of that? Let's say, right? Kagon, for example, mar la'asot lo tas v'lachpor. Okay? So that somebody was carrying out the hoe or the shovel in order to sharpen the blade as well as to dig with it. Sefer Torah, lahagia v'likrot bo. Okay? Or let's say the Torah scroll, it took it out to be able to make corrections in it as well as to read from it. Kamash Malan, says the Torah, comes to tell us that that's not the case. That Rabbi Shimon, however, says that while he may hold that way, the halacha is not that way. Okay, now we get to another aspect of the Gemara. Following, Hahu Shichva, we have a particular corpse, the Hava Bedrukara, okay? And it was lying in the location, the city, the town of Drukara, a Babylonian town, okay? Shara Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak la'afuke lekarmalit. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak permitted the corpse to be carried out into the Carmelite. Okay? Amar le Rabbi Yochanan, Achva Damar B'rei de Ravana. And what happened? Says Rav Nachman, the brother of Mar, the son of Rabbana to Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak, right? Keman, according to whose authority, okay, or according to what basis did you permit it? So his answer was, Rabbi Shimon, to the view of Rabbi Shimon. Okay? So now he challenges him. Emar, the patar Rabbi Shimon, mechiyuv chabat. Okay? Are you saying then that Rabbi Shimon exempts the person from mechatas? Okay, from bringing a chatas. Isur de Rabbanan miha'ika. Okay, but nevertheless, there is a rabbinic prohibition there. Okay? Amarle, he said to him, Elohim, by God's name, in other words, taking an oath, he said, the Eilit Be'at, okay? You're going to base it on this, okay, you're going to base it on that kind of a statement. Va'afilu Rabbi Yehuda Shari, okay? He's saying even according to Rabbi Yehuda, okay, this would be permitted. Now remember, Rabbi Yehuda had that, held that Malacha Sheinat Tzricha Legufa was still going to be chayav. Okay, so what happens? Dami ka'amina l'reshut harabbi, right? Why? Because he's saying that even if he said that it could be carried out to the street, you think that's what I said? The Carmelit come. I said it could be permitted to carry it out simply to the Carmelit. Gadol kavod habriot. Shedoche et lo ta'aseh shebetorah. Says, great is the respect, the dignity of human beings that one might even say it supersedes, it overcomes a love, a negative injunction of the Torah. Okay? In other words, since it may have been a prohibition to Rabbanan, okay, nevertheless felt that in this case, because of taking the deceased out of the house, okay, therefore that would have been permitted on Shabbat to put it in the Carmelit. Okay, now, Gemara continues. Tznan hatam. It says, but we learned elsewhere the following. another Braita, Hatolesh Simane Tum'ah, one who was to pluck, let's say, white hairs, if they were a sign of tzara'at, let's say, Simane Tum'ah, okay, V'hachveh HaMechayeh, all right, or he was to take some fire to burn the raw flesh where the tumah could be found. Over below ta'aseh, okay, he is transgressing a negative commandment, right? So what happens, right? Itma, okay, and about this it was stated, echat mishtayim, if he does one out of two hairs, chayav, he would be culpable, okay, would be guilty. Why? Because Pasuk specifically says, be careful, take heed of the plague of leprosy. Echat mishalosh, okay, one out of three. Rav Nachman Amar chayav. Rav Nachman said he would be guilty. Rav Sheshet Amar Patur. And Rav Sheshet disagrees and says he would be not guilty, right? What happened? Rav Nachman Amar Chayav. Rav Nachman says he's guilty. Ahani Ma'asav, because his act is effective, right? It has results. It makes it appear that the tzara'at section is no longer there. De'i mishtakla chad arichte. Okay, because if he was to remove another hair, then it would appear completely gone. Azla la latuma. Then the uncleanness would be disappear. Rav Sheshet Amar Patur. Rav Sheshet, on the other words, says he's not culpable. Why? Hashta here, mihat ha'itilatuma, because in this case, okay, right, Rav Sheshet argues, okay, because you would see some sort of act, right, and therefore it would tell you Tuma was still there, and therefore whatever he did, okay, was ineffective, and therefore as a result, he would be patur from doing it. Amar Rav Sheshet, mina aminala, on what basis Rav Sheshet says, do I know this? Do I say this, right? Ditnan, as taught elsewhere in a Braita. V'chein kezayet min hamet, and likewise if it's an olive amount from a corpse, right? Or kezayet min hanavela, this was the rest of that Mishnah, or a olive amount from a nevela, chayav, then he's guilty. Ha chatzi zayet patur, but if he were to only carry out, let's say, half an olive amount, he would be exempt. Right? Vahatanya, and aren't we taught elsewhere in another Braita, Chatzi Zayet Chayav, that half an olive amount he would be culpable, would be guilty, right? My love Hadatanya, wasn't it not the following that was taught? Chayav the afik Chatzi Zayet Mikazayet, right? It was taught he would be, if he carried out half the size of an olive from the piece the size of an olive in its entirety, Bahaditnan, the patur. But here it's also taught that he would be exempt, right? The afik chatzi zayet mikazayet umechza. Okay, that if he taught, he would be exempt if he took out, if he removed a half a kazayet from a kazayet and a half, right? He would be exempt, right? Rav Nachman, Idi ve'idi chayav. But Rav Nachman would say that in both cases, he's going to be culpable. V'ha ditznan patur, and here, where it teaches he would be exempt, da'afik chatzi zayet mimeit gadol, It's only a situation where he carried out a half olive's amount from a very large corpse. Okay, from that, okay, right? Because even if somebody were to carry out, let's say, another half of a kazayas, right, it would make no real difference, okay, in terms of the amount removed from the corpse. Okay, we go on to a new Mishnah. Okay, our new Mishnah, again, we might say deals with measurement here, but it still continues with aspects that should not be done on Shabbat. Matnitin. Hanotel tzipornav zo bazo. One who removes, let's say, his fingernails one after the other, either by hand, or b'shinav, or by his teeth. V'chein sa'aro, or if he removes, in other words, plucks his hair. V'chein sfamo, and likewise his mustache. V'chein zikano, and likewise his beard. V'chein hagodelet, and likewise one who braids hair. V'chein hakochelet, and likewise one who puts on blue eyeshadow. V'chein hapokeset, and likewise one who puts on rouge on her face. Rabbi Eliezer mechayev. Rabbi Eliezer says they are guilty. V'chachamim osrin mishum shvut. And the sages forbid these actions as an example of shvut. Okay, as an example of work being done on Shabbat. Gemara. Let's go on. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, says Rabbi Eliezer, machloket biyad. Okay, that this argument is really if it's done by the hand. Okay, aval bekli. Okay, but certainly if it was done using an instrument, one would be culpable. Pshita, that's obvious, says the Gemara. Zo bezotna. It says this way or this way. Mahu detema. What is it trying to, you want to tell us? Rabbanan beklinami patre. Is it seem to be telling us that the rabbis would imply that using an instrument, one would also be exempt? Vahadikatani, zo bezo. And the fact that our Mishnah teaches this or this, lahodi acha kocho de Rabbi Eliezer, comes to show us the power of the Isur as presented by Rabbi Eliezer. Kamashmalan comes to teach us. Va'amar Rabbi Eliezer, as Rabbi Eliezer says, machloket la'atzmo. Okay, comes to teach us that Rabbi Eliezer wants, Rabbi Elazar is explaining it slightly differently. That the argument between the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer is in terms of the person, whether or not they were doing it for themselves. Aval lechavero divrei hakol pator. But for another person, okay, they would say, everybody would say they're exempt. Pshita. That's obvious. Sipornav, when it talks about fingernails, it's not. It's taught. Mahu detema. So then what are you trying to tell us? Rabbi Eliezer, lechavero, nami mechayev. That Rabbi Eliezer would say if one were to do it for another person, also would be culpable. Vahadikatani sipornav. And the fact that they teach the example of the fingernails, Lodiacha Kochan de Rabbanan, would come to tell us the strength of the rabbis. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that's the case. v'chein sa'aro, and likewise in regarding combing, plucking hair, let's say. Tana, okay, and it was taught the following. Hanotel malo pi hazug chayav. One who takes enough hair, okay, in the blades of the scissors on Shabbat is culpable. The kama malo pi hazug. And how much hair then do we say is included in the amount grabbed in the blades of a scissors? Amar Rav Yehuda shtayim. Says Rav Yehuda, it's 2 hairs. V'hatanya. But aren't we taught elsewhere in another braita? V'lekarcha shtayim. Okay? That to make one bald, it's 2. Ema, I would say, v'chem lekarcha shtayim. Therefore, I would say, and thus also to make one bald, it's 2. Tanya nami hachi. And we have another braita that teaches, hanotel malo pi hazug b'Shabbat. One who takes, okay, enough hair to fill between the blades of the scissors on Shabbat, chayav, is culpable. Excuse me. V'chama malo pi hazug, and how much here is the hair filling the blades of the scissors? Shtayim, it's 2. Rabbi Eliezer omer echad. Rabbi Eliezer says 1 is sufficient. Umodim chachamim Rabbi Eliezer. And the sages acknowledge the view of Rabbi Eliezer. B'melaket levanot mitoch shchorot. In a situation where one is removing white hairs from among dark hairs. She'afilu echat chayav, that even in the case of removing one, doing so on Shabbat, okay, one would be culpable. V'davar zeh af b'chol asur, says the Gemara. But isn't that same act of men, in this case, particularly removing white hairs from their dark hairs forbidden even on a weekday? Mishum shene'amar, because it says, Lo yilbash gever simlat isha, that a man should not put on a woman's garment. Okay. Now, they derive from that any kind of act that is, let's call it, of a feminine nature for beautification. Tanya, and a Braita teaches, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Siporin sheperesh ruba. But Rabbi Shimon was saying, if a fingernail where the majority of the nail was coming off, v'tzitzin sheporshu ruban, or shreds of skin, okay, where the majority therefore also is coming off, biyad, to remove the rest by hand, mutar is permitted. Bekli chayav, but with a utensil, it is forbidden. One is culpable. Chatat, culpable to bring a chatat. So Gemara asks, Mi ika midi, is there such a thing, he says, the bekli chayav chatat, that where using a utensil, one is culpable to bring a chatas. Ubiyad mutar lechatchila, but doing so by hand, one is permitted even initially. Hachi kama, this is what they mean to say. Pirshu ruban, if most of the nail, okay, was off, biyad mutar, removing it by hand is permitted. Bikli patur aval asur, with a utensil, one is exempt, but it is forbidden. Gemara continues. Lo pirshu ruban, if the majority of the nail, okay, or the skins, shreds of skin were not coming off, biyad patur aval asur bikli, okay, chayav chatat. Okay? In that case, with the hand, it would be exempt, but forbidden with a kli, all right, one would be chayav chata. Now, Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The law is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Amar Rava bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Vahu shepershu klape mala, but a sort of a limiting definition. But that's when the nail or the shreds of skin are bending upward, arot oto, and they cause a great deal of discomfort to the person. Okay, we're going on now. L'chein hagodelet, and likewise when we said somebody is braiding the hair. Godelet, braiding, kochelet, putting on blue eyeshadow, upokeset, putting on rouge, mishum mai mechayva. On what basis do we say that the person would be culpable? Amar Rabbi Avin, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. Godelet, braiding, mishum oreget, because that's very similar to weaving. Kochelet, on blue eyeshadow, mishum kotevet, because it's similar to writing. Pokeset, putting on rouge, mishum tave, it's similar to spinning. Amru Rabbanan, kame de Rabbi Abahu, but the rabbis went and said before Rabbi Abahu, v'chi derech ariga bechach, is there really any kind of weaving in that? V'chi derech tiva bechach, and is there really any kind of writing in that? V'chi derech tiviyah bechach, and is there really any kind of spinning in that? Ela amar Rabbi Abahu. But Rabbi Abahu says, L'didi mefar shali minei the Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. It was explained to me personally by Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Chanina. And let's go over just a little bit onto Tzadi Hey, right? Kochelet, okay, putting blue eyeshadow on, right? Mishum tzovaat is like dyeing, okay? Right? Godelet, okay, plaiting or braiding the hair, upokeset, okay? And putting on rouge, mishum bone, is like bone, right? So the Gemara asks, V'chiderech binyan bechach? Is that really any kind of building? And yes, answers the Gemara. Kidadaresh Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, as was explained, as was expounded by Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh on the following pasuk: Vayivin Hashem Elokim et Hatzela, and Hashem built the rib. Melamed Shekil'ah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lechava, tells us that Hashem braided or plaited the hair of Chava, V'heviah Eitzel Adam, and then brought her before man. Shekain Bekarche Hayam, because in those cities around the sea, Korim Likliata Benita, they call the idea of plaiting, of braiding, a kind of building. Okay, and we'll just do one little bit section. Okay, actually, I think, let me just check. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we'll stop right there for today, all right? And we'll pick up then tomorrow a few lines down then on Sadi Hay, okay? All right, so everybody have a good day.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care.
Have a great day, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. We got one problem. Erwin,
Wake him up. No.
shh, leave quietly. That's all.